Hello guys, welcome to my channel Chess Wizard. In this video, we will know how to set up the standard chessboard and all the different rules of chess, which includes how the pieces of chess moves, pawn promotion, castling, checkmate, stalemate, etc. And if you like the video, consider subscribing, sharing and liking the video. So let's start the video. First of all, we need to remember that the chessboard contains 8 rows and 8 columns. Chessboard should be placed in such manner that each player has white or light color on the bottom right of the board. The second row of each side is placed with pawns in a straight line, and first row should be set up as follows. The rooks to be placed on the corner of the chessboard, the knights are placed inwards with the rooks. The next to the knights, we have bishops. After that we place queens on their matching color, which means the white queen on white square and black queen on black square, and finally, the king is placed on the remaining square. On a correctly set up board, each piece would be facing one another. The queen across the queen and king across the king. The player with white pieces always moves first and then black makes one move. Each player will make alternative moves like this, until one gets checkmate. Each of the 6 pieces have their unique way of moving. Let's start with the movement of rook. The rook moves in a straight line or in the plus pattern as you see. It can move any number of squares vertically and horizontally. Rooks can capture first enemy piece they move into. When you capture an enemy piece, you simply remove that piece from the board and go to the square it occupies. Now, let's talk about bishops. The bishop on white square moves diagonally on white square only, and the bishop on black square moves diagonally on black squares. Now, let's consider queen. The queen is said to be the most powerful piece on board because it can move like rook as well as like the bishops. It can move any number of squares vertically, horizontally, and diagonally on board. The queen capture the first enemy piece, it moves into. Let's consider about knights now. The knights move in a shape of an L or 2½ squares. Only the knight can jump over other pieces. It means that knight can jump across these pieces like this. Now, the pawn is the only piece that moves in one direction and capture in another direction. We can move pawns either 1 square or 2 squares for their first move only. But then, it moves only 1 square to the enemy piece. But captures enemy pieces only 1 square diagonal. If a pawn reaches the last square of the row, it can promote itself into a queen, knight, rook, or bishop. Now, let's talk about the priceless or most important piece of the game, which is the king, because if you lose the king, you will lose the game. The king moves 1 square at a time and in any direction. Whenever a move threatens the king, the opponent must say check, or simply check means that the king is threatened, and we need to save that by moving the king to a safe square. Block the check, or if you can then simply capture the enemy piece which is threatening the king. If you are in check and there is no way to protect to your king, or no safe square is left for your king, then the attacking player declares a checkmate. Sometimes, the chess game also results in a draw by stalemate. Stalemates occurs under the following situations. First, your king is not in check and there is no legal moves. Game can also be drawn by insufficient pieces. Now, let's consider about 50 move rules where neither side is likely to win. If the game continues, it will still end as a draw. But by this time with the 50 moves rule states that if both players make 50 moves each without any pawn moves or any captures, the game's as end draw, and the game could also be drawn if a player does a moves exact 3 times. Now, let's talk about en passant rule, which is, if an enemy's pawn ignores a pawn and moves 2 squares or gets parallel to the pawn, then we can't capture enemy's pawn. But by the en passant rule in chess, only in our first move only our pawn can go diagonally 1 square, but we can't do it after the first opportunity. There is also the rule or move called castling, and it inverts the king and the rook. In this, we can move 2 pieces at one time, which are king and rook. In this position, white can move 2 squares towards the corner rook at king side, and the rook to be placed on the other side just next to the king like this. That's king side castling. Now, similarly, 2 squares towards the rook at the corner and rook to be placed on the other side just next to that queen side castling. The condition for castling is that there should not be any pieces between the king and the rook. The second condition is that you cannot castle out of a check. Third condition, that you cannot castle through the check. Now it's time for chess puzzle. Feel free to post any of your doubts in comments or can mail me, and if you want to learn chess language, then go ahead and click on the link in description. Don't forget to leave a comment and a like. Also follow me on Instagram and like my page on Facebook.